All right, folks. Sorry to make you wait. I'm glad to see all of your faces and be here with you. Let's go ahead and we'll call the Facilities and Safety Committee meeting of the Board of Trustees of HCISD on May 2nd, beginning at something. Am I watching?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. 4:06, it looks like. So, if you will indulge me, what we're going to do is a little bit of reordering so that the school safety update and the closed session associated with the school safety update are moved up in the agenda, and then we will come back and reorder. I think that many of you are here for that, and that way it allows that to go first. So a little bit of reordering. So we are called to order. Let me go ahead and do, though, the public comment for agenda topics.
There are no public comments.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we'll check on that. Let's see. So now we will go to Dr. Villarreal for the school safety update.
All right, thank you, Dr. Reiniger. Board members, I also want to recognize Dr. Noyola. She is joining us via Zoom. She is currently in Austin right now. So Dr. Noyola, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so this afternoon we're going to provide another school safety update. This time we're going to be looking at internal communication. If you recall, at last month's meeting we looked at external communication, what that communication looks like between law enforcement, should that be necessary at any time during a significant incident that may happen in our school district. And so questions have been posed to us as far as how does it work when a particular standard response protocol is called at the school, whether it be a hold, a secure lockdown. How does that filter down from the campus to this office and then out to our students and out to our families? So we're going to touch on that this afternoon so we can get a good understanding of what that looks like. So first and foremost, you know, at the center of it all are our campuses, right? And so if there's an event that's going on our campus, whether that be a hold, and remember, hold means that they just stay in their classrooms, business continues as usual. If there's a secure, that means there's a problem outside in the community, so we're going to make sure that we keep an eye on the perimeter of the school, but business is going to continue as usual on in our school. And then the third one that's called is a lockdown. And of course that's a real serious one where everyone hides in their classrooms, away from windows, and no one's supposed to be moving. And so any of those three, at any time that any of those three are called, we need to make sure that we're communicating that to our school community and to our families as well. And so the first thing that happens is that a text message is sent from campus administration to the following people that you see there: to our superintendent, our assistant superintendents, our associate superintendent for communications, director for media relations, our director for emergency management, that's Sandy Castillo right here, and then our safety coordinator as well, that's Tanya Sandoval. And so we've practiced this before with our principals. So every administrator in this entire district has that group already set up in their cell phones. So when it's necessary, they just go to that group and they say, for example, Gutierrez Middle School is currently in a lockdown, okay? So that message goes out. From there, the superintendent gathers information from either the campus administrator or the assistant superintendents, in this case myself and Lori Romero, my elementary counterpart, and then the superintendent communicates with the school board. The lead assistant superintendent, and that will be either me or Lori. So if it's a secondary campus, I'm the lead assistant superintendent, and Ms. Romero is a supporting assistant superintendent. So my role in all of that is I'm going to call the principal or the administrator that made that call, that sent that text message, and I'm going to remain on the phone with them throughout the entire standard response protocol. Getting details about what's going on, I'm going to be communicating that to the superintendent. Meanwhile, our supporting assistant superintendent is going to get in contact with other impacted campuses administrations. So for example, in our school district, we have a lot of campuses, some campuses that are within a 1 or 2 mile radius of each other. So if there's an incident at Memorial Middle School, impacted campuses may be Harlingen High School, maybe Means Elementary, maybe Long Elementary, Early Childhood Academy, and so there may need to be some action taken on those campuses based on what is called on that particular campus. And so the supporting assistant superintendent, that would be Ms. Romero, she's going to be communicating with them to determine, are we going to go ahead and call the same thing at those campuses that are nearby. And then our Director of Emergency Management and School Safety and Safety Coordinator, that's Mr. Castillo and Ms. Sandoval, they're going to communicate immediately with law enforcement to understand what's going on and also to ascertain the response that's going on. They'll also be communicating with other impacted campus administration as well. Should there be a need to send law enforcement to those campuses as well, they're going to be assisting in that. Our Assistant Superintendent for District Operations, that's Mr. Oscar Tapia. He's going to be communicating with our Administrator for District Operations, that's Ken Lee, our Director of Child Nutrition, that's Judy Baker, and our Director of Transportation, Luciano Rubio. So a lot of those things are impacted. So when there's a lockdown on a campus and buses are on the way to that particular campus for whatever reason, we need to stop the buses, right? If there are meals being delivered to a particular campus and there's an incident going on, we need to stop the meals. And there's just a lot of things that occur. And so Mr. Tapia takes care of all that and will advise and guide the people that you see there that he is responding to. And then our Associate Superintendent for Communication, that's Ms. Marcia Martinez over there, and our Director of Media Relations, Brianna Bella Garcia, they're going to send a text to the remaining principals and senior team. So many times what happened is an incident at one campus, parents start calling their own child's campus that may be across town. I heard this situation's going on at this school, what information can you give me? So we try to give those principals as much information so they can reassure some of those parents that may be calling, as well as other team members. But the most important part of that group there is the external communication with our impacted families, our public information officers from law enforcement, our news media, if we start getting phone calls from news media, and then internal communication with the staff and campuses. So all that comes out of that office. So again, the information is going to be sent out. For example, like I mentioned at the beginning, Gutierrez Middle School is currently under secure for whatever reason. We'll keep you updated. That's translated to Spanish as well. So again, that is sent out to our families and our community. And normally the process is, depending on the length of the message, we'll go ahead and send a text message and an email simultaneously. So either they'll get that via email or they'll get that via text. And so, as we've gone through certain things this year, we've learned that our families like to receive text messages. And so that's what we've been doing as well. And it's been working very well this school year. And that's just a little bit of more of what they do, things that, that they work on there in that department. There, so as far as emails and text messages. And of course, our superintendent continues to notify the team of any updates. And then upcoming, what we're currently working on is our SPAT technology. That stands for Silent Panic Alert Technology. And so that's an emergency notification system that we have. We're developing the infrastructure right now. And what that will allow, it will allow our campuses to be able to push a button on a phone and it will automatically inform those three levels right there. Campus level administration and staff, district level administration, and then first responders, law enforcement, depending on the standard response protocol. If it's a hold and a secure, it depends. Does law enforcement need to know? So for example, there's an emergency incident in one of our hallways. Well, we're gonna hold in our classrooms. Law enforcement's not gonna be needed. We're gonna call 911, but they're not gonna need to be informed. And so it's going to depend on what type of incident is occurring to who's going to receive that panic alert technology. So what that assists is sometimes people in tense situations tend to panic and they'll get the phone and they just kind of lose sight of what they're supposed to be doing. In this case, it's one button that they would press on their phone depending on the standard response protocol that's needed, and then that message is automatically sent to those three levels right there, again, depending on who needs to be notified based on the event occurring. And that is internal communication for this afternoon. We'll now open it up to discussion or any questions that anybody may have.
Is the SPAT different than, like, I know when sometimes I work at the front desk, there's like the button. Is that like the same thing? And they're like, no, push that button because then the police will come. Is that like the same as?
Technology-wise, yes.
Okay.
Technology-wise, but it's a little bit different in that that solely communicates with law enforcement. Here, it's going to be able to communicate with those various layers.
What about if the phones aren't able to work out of the school? How do you get that information out to them?
So we're working on technology with our cell phones as well. I have Mr. Jaime Reyes here. He's been spearheading this, and so you want to be able to answer that question, Mr. Reyes?
Yes, sir. So as we work on the plan, it's going to be multifaceted. So phase one is to incorporate those things that we can control, which is the PA system, the phones, as we extend on the software, we're looking at capabilities where we can extend to external devices like cell phones, the monitors and things like that.
Any other questions?
Other questions?
One question, so I guess the instinct would be, at a school, would be that the teacher sees an incident going on, or whoever's first to identify it would be to call 911.
Yes.
So are we saying they're going to begin this process before calling 911, or call 911 and then begin the process?
So yes, they would call 911 first. Depending on the situation, the first instinct is to call 911, call 911, and then they inform, whomever their immediate supervisor of what's going on with the situation. Yeah, because, emergency response is the most important thing. Absolutely.
Other questions?
And then how does this, I know that y'all have been meeting with also law enforcement entities, but how do they play into this process as well?
Sure. So whenever, it's kind of what Ms. Bondo was alluding to, I'm sorry, Mr. Lau was alluding to as far as the 911 phone call that is made, right? And so if the 911 phone call is made to law enforcement, they're immediately going to respond. We'll find out as well, and then that's where these two spring into action to communicate with law enforcement, as well as our SRO sergeant that are going to be, organizing the response of what's going on. So they're immediately notified as well. And then once we have that SPAT system in place, they'll automatically be informed as well.
Two things that I'd love to see you expand on the plan. One might be focused on the kids who are on that campus. As we know, kids are not only receiving information about situations on their own campus when it's the situation, they also can spin it, just like adults can, and get false information going, which can either help or hurt that situation. So getting information to kids in a timely manner so that maybe there's ways to help them get accurate information. I didn't see them specifically listed on the plans.
Yes, and so after that particular incident, we started that process and working directly both with that department over there, our communications department, to monitor social media to see if there's falsehoods that are being spread. But also, we immediately send out counselors and administrators into the hallways and to go into the classrooms to check on students' mental well-being, but as well to be able to dispel any rumors that are going on. And so we've already put that into practice as well.
Okay, I
based on
guess
this
what I'm
information.
talking about though is like text messages and social media posts are going to parents, but those same things need to get to kids to be able to give
Correct.
accurate HCISD, this is what's happening.
Right, yeah, and so we can look at sending, so we have access to student emails as well, and so that's a good idea, and sending it to student emails as well, but also we send it to staff members by design, so that when class is in session, they can also communicate that to the students so they can be aware of what's going on. But we can add that added layer to
And
sending
like
it
at
to
the middle
student
school
emails.
levels, like we have I don't know if it's at all of middle school, we have a phone count, so immediately when they come into the classroom, it has to go in there. So normally, we haven't done a lockdown drill yet, but they're already put away, so no one can go and like grab their phone if there was something happening. So the teacher's like on them, then there shouldn't be any text messages to any parents because the phones are, they're put away.
In some accounts,
So.
but
But it's good,
in
it's by
situations,
campus, yeah.
yeah, but in
Yeah, the
situations
older
where
ones.
there is a serious situation, they're gonna get their cell phones, yeah.
Yeah.
Because parents want to be reassured that they're safe.
So
It's
just
understandable.
adding that, and then I wasn't sure, although you just said it, so I might have missed it, just how we're posting things, either on websites, of campus websites, district websites, and other social media.
Yes.
Because, people are looking everywhere.
Correct, yes. So there's, the different social media platforms that we have through the text message, through the emails, correct, as many ways as possible to make sure to get that information first and get in front of everything
Right.
before, rumors
And I
start.
think because it wasn't listed on there specifically, that would go out at the same time, once it gets to the communications department, that would go out at the same time that we're setting external. So that's
Right.
part of the external
Correct.
posting to social.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that can just be added.
Absolutely.
And maybe like something
Yes.
about how often,
Sure.
because it's not a one-time.
No, it's not.
We know that's
And
not
that's a
gonna
good
work,
point too,
right?
because we want to get it out as quickly as possible. So if we have limited information, we're still going to get it out there, but we will send updates.
Right, right. thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll now go into adjournment into closed session, but I'm going to have Dr. B read our statement for that.
Yeah. Okay, so since our last Facilities and Safety Committee meeting, one of our campuses, Austin Elementary, has undergone an intruder detection audit by the Texas School Safety Center. Austin Elementary did have one minor finding. As per the Texas Education Agency and the Texas School Safety Center, the one finding will be discussed and reported during executive session. So at this time, Dr. Reiniger, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, okay. So we'll go into executive session. That's members of the Safety Committee, the Facilities and Safety Committee. You please stay. Those who are guests, if you'll just step out for long enough for us to have executive session, and then we'll call you back. Thank you. All right, we're good. All right, we're now going to move to item 3, presentation and update on ESSER funds. Mr. Knapp.
Reiniger, members of the committee, Dr. Noyola. The first project I'm going to talk about is the ESSER funded re-roofing projects. This is the one with Rio Roofing that got awarded the project. They're doing several elementaries and the elementary annex and the Vernon. They've already started across the street at the annex building. You can, if you drive around, there's already railing, fence, safety railing all the way to the perimeter of the top. And they've sealed off their areas of safety fences where they're going to be staging for their materials and their trucks and things like that. And this picture was taken yesterday of the roof. Today they're actually starting to do the tear off. So they've already started that project. And then they'll go to the schools. As soon as school's out, we'll start working at the Vernon and other school sites. There are a couple other roofing projects, the high school, and another one we're bidding out, but there's no construction activity, so I'll report from the next meeting. On the paving and drainage project we're doing over at the Secondary Alternative Center on Houston, and the building we got the first responders program, runs on Oklahoma. We're doing this is the end of the road, and then there's a bus drive that comes and drops off to the Secondary Alternative Center, and that road is Galicia Road, and it's right along the railroad track. And when we get major floods, that area floods, and so the Galicia, we have to keep compacting it and fixing it and leveling it. So we're finally going to, since we own the property now, we're going to asphalt it and expand this parking a little bit to give it more room for the parents to turn around. And in the first responders building and the other building that we bought, we're going to tear out all the old cracked concrete and we're going to do a new circular drive, a new parking lots here, and the areas that I'm showing will all be brand new. There will also be a supplemental package for landscaping plans because the city will require a sprinkler landscaping. So we bid this project out, opened the bids today at 2 o'clock, and we only had one bidder, Betty Excavation, for $566,000. So we're going to be evaluating that bid. Our budget was about $515,000, so we're close to it. And then we did an increase for the landscape allowance, so about $40,000 off our original estimate, so it's not too bad. So we're going to review the proposal, look at all the paperwork, get a recommendation from the engineer after they've read all the information. If everything looks good, and we may be submitting a agenda item for next Tuesday's board meeting for award. So all elementary kitchen, I brought this forth last week. We're still working on punch list items, and they are complete 100%. We've got city inspections. They've passed, and we got new terrazzo floors. We've got new ceiling, new light fixtures, new freezer cooler that you can see in the bottom right. So everything is pretty much done. I believe the fire inspection report, I think, passed. Is that correct, Kimberly?
No.
That's the one pending. Once we get the fire inspection report, then we'll get the certificate of occupancy, and Judy's going to start moving in her kitchen equipment. So that project's pretty much finished. It's some of the future work. Renovations in the high school. We had a meeting a couple days ago at the site with the school principal and the contractor and the architect to go over the staging areas, any safety protocols. and some of the materials to be ordered, going over some submittal information. And again, this one, they've already started tearing off the stucco on the band hall building that had a stucco that was all cracked. You can see it there in the front of the street. And it's all being removed and it's going to be replaced with some metal panels, different colors. And so we're discussing the pattern and the design of the material so that the contractor can get it approved and ordered. And then the quad area, they already started some of the demo work and they're doing surveying work to mark all the areas of the edges of the improvements they're going to do for sidewalks and elevated surfaces and ramps and so forth. So they already started this project. And that's all I have to report at this time. Are there any questions? If not, we'll move on to the financial.
Please.
Thanks, sir. Dr. Reiniger, board members, Dr. Nicola. Before you is our financial TRU report. We focus on column 5. Currently, we have spent $79,185,785. Current year, which is column 6, we have spent $11,308,636. That's about $125,000 increase from the previous month's report. Total spent and encumbered is $90,494,421. If you compare that to our budgeted balance, we are at a balance of $3.8 million on our TRE projects as of April 30th. 2020. Any questions or concerns about our TRE budget?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Thank you, Mr. Tapia. All right, Mr. Mendoza, do you want to go ahead and present the update on HCISD Public Facility Lease Revenue Bond Series 2007?
Thank you, ma'am. So we discussed this, the possibility of paying out our 2007 public facility lease revenue bonds last month and have additional information to share with the committee. There's a printout in front of you that our financial advisors presented to us, prepared for us. Mr. Magallanes and Dr. De Los Santos are here. We wanted to present both. That's an option to pay off early or to keep paying these bonds as scheduled. These bonds are scheduled to decrease in 2027, 4 years from now. So I would like them to review the possible savings if we pay them off early or if we continue paying as is.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members, Dr. Noyola. I'm Ángel Magallanes with Estrada Hinojosa. With me today is Dr. Miguel de los Santos. So we've been working collaboratively with your CFO, business office, and bond counsel, and we've been looking at both options at what you could do with this school lease revenue bonds that you have outstanding currently. So what we have is we have an interest rate that's going to reset in August 15th. So if we stay with the bonds, the interest rate will reset to the market rate at that time. And currently market rate is about a 5% plus whatever spread the bank will give us at that time. So it could be 5.25 or we don't know till 8.15. What you have currently, you do have an interest rate of 3.04. And one of the things that we were considering, one of the things that was mentioned last time was what if we keep the money in an investment account and have approximately right now, I believe the investment account is making about 5%. So those two interest rates, what you're making on interest on your investment and what you're going to possibly pay in interest in the future payments are pretty correlated. And they're going to correlate year after year throughout the span of this bond. So what we did was an analysis on the back end. What could those savings look like? They're very minimal. So what would be the reason to paying off these bonds early for a minimal interest rate is right now you do have security on what your interest rate is doing now and what you could do with these bond funds. So what we mean is that in the future, this interest rate could fluctuate higher, it could fluctuate lower. We just don't know. So we did put a hypothetical in this analysis of 5% for interest earnings and 5.25 for interest accrued. Ultimately, the option for the district to consider is if you do have funds to pay off these bonds, it's beneficial, you get them off your books. Also through a lease, so it'll go from the PFC over to the school district, and you'll have, the school district officially will have complete ownership of the facility. If the school district does pay them off early as well, is you do build up capacity if you do want to do another maintenance tax note in the near future. So if you do need some more funds to build other projects, you could look into another maintenance tax note and pretty much have the same debt service that you currently have. So those are two options to consider. We believe that both are very good options. Again, you have a very minimal interest savings with our hypothetical interest rates, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on whether you want to pay out the bonds early and get ownership of the facility, or if you just want to hold off, keep on the payment, and then risk whatever interest rate that might be year after year till 2027. I don't know if there's any questions.
What's your recommendation?
Recommendation, just for security, and knowing what we know now, I can't predict the future. And if the funds are available, and Mr. Mendoza, we've been discussing that, I believe you feel very comfortable with the funds available in your general, on the M&O side.
So currently we have about $48 million in our fund balance. We pay them off, they'll free up some funds in our local operating fund to help with our budget this coming year, by $450 grand.
So staff's recommending that we go ahead and pay them off, or what?
If the savings are there, that would be one of the recommendations.
Yeah, you have a healthy fund balance. We feel that you could comfortably pay off the bonds and make sure that interest rates don't keep on increasing. And your interest rate could increase at one point. You're fixed for 1 year, and then your investment earnings could decrease as well. So it could have an inverse effect, but typically they're very correlated.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what are y'all sort of anticipating in August, the interest rate? 5.2, 5.2?
It could be high. It could be higher than that.
Could be higher than
5.2.
that?
Yes.
In that case, we'd be better off paying them off.
Yeah.
And it would help.
So,
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so just to be clear, the net projected savings by paying them off is $158,000, right?
Yes, and that was using that first page. That was just using a very conservative, without taking into account. That was using an average of what we might project that from 2023 to 2027 that interest rate might be. And this again, that was using a very rough projection,
Okay,
and
so
keeping it conservative on savings.
Okay.
And then on the second page, we're using just the actual current rate for the interest accrued, and then what the interest earning rate is currently at. So
If we left that money invested, we don't
Mhm.
pay the $2 million off, we leave
Yeah.
it invested, we could make maybe 190.
correct.
So, do we think the fund balance is going to go up? Brent?
So
Do we think the fund balance is going to go up after this legislative session, or will it go down?
That's a good question. For this current year, we're trying to leverage our ESSER 3 and ESSER 2 funding to make sure that our fund balance is maximized as best as we can.
So if the current property value study isn't enforced, it's going to go down, right? So
That's correct, yes. If the current value is upheld and we lose that appeal, more than likely there's going to be.
So it's still,
$2 million
it's not finalized yet. right?
It's not finalized yet because there's a bill, House Bill 100, that may impact that particular appeal. That if it goes through, then the local values will be reinstated.
Correct.
And those $2 million will be refunded back to us, but next year, not this year.
Correct.
That's correct.
So, I mean, I don't know, it just seems to me that this is, because we're going to dip in $2 million right away to our fund balance to pay this off, at a time when it might be,
Sure.
go another $2 million, just because of what happens with a with the property value study
That's right.
and the decrease in funding because of
Yeah.
that, state funding because of that. So I mean, I don't know, it's just, it's a lot of work to do to get a little bit of a gain.
Sure. It's just an option for school board.
Yeah.
And further information on that, our preliminary values just came out for 2023. They're at 5.4 million.
No, I know,
So
I've seen that.
for our district, so they just went up.
I've seen them, yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm saying, so we
Yeah.
have some work to do with the comptroller to figure out what's real and stuff like that. They're picking a certain part, they're picking a lot of high value sales.
Yes.
And
Yes.
basing value based on that, and essentially, the market is now depressed and everything's different now. And
That is
so-
correct.
But yet, we're gonna be taxed, we're gonna be funded from the state as if we're gonna be collecting these kinds of taxes, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's gonna be litigation, and the SOA, I don't know how they're gonna rule on that, because this is gonna go to litigation, it's 30 to 40% increase, so. But all that to say, I think the fund balance, we gotta be real careful, because
Oh,
it's really
absolutely.
awesome
Yeah.
now, but we don't know what's gonna happen over the next couple of years,
Yeah.
just because of all the.
Sure.
And to add to that, there's a couple components in legislation right now also. Looking at the M&O side, as y'all know, they've always talked about just the pupil funding, per pupil funding, it's at 6,100. They're looking at increasing that just slightly. But the one thing that's really going to have a huge impact, and you all would benefit greatly just because y'all passed that TRE, is the yields on the golden pennies and the copper pennies.
Sure.
So those are going to go up from, currently your golden pennies at $98, and they should go up to about $128. And then the copper penny is half of that. So right now the copper penny is half of $98 and the golden. So those pennies, due to your TRE, you're going to be able to get a capture of a few more million per year on that.
When do we have to make this decision for this, to do this, if we do this or not? When's our last date?
This would have to, I want to say by mid-June for the reset. If we're going to continuous paying, we need to reset and do an amendment to the covenant on the bond document in order to get a new actual index since LIBOR is going away. So we would have to do those documents so the reset could be done and the documents could be in place for the 8/15 payment.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. Maybe we should just keep thinking about it, because I mean, there's a lot of things juggling right now, and there's a lot to think about. I mean, anybody would want to save $160,000. That's money we could spend, on our kids and our teachers and things like that. So on programming. So, but I mean, I would just have to think about it.
Yeah, most definitely. That's what we're here for. That's to provide you as much
I mean,
information.
you guys are very generous on the fees. They're next to nothing, so appreciate that. That's not the issue. The issue is the 2 million, and
No.
we'll take that off our.
Yeah, that's what I said. Either way is good. We believe, we feel that right now, just having the security, not knowing what interest rates could do in the future, getting off your books and clearing that from your books is very beneficial if you feel comfortable with the fund balance. And that's going to be the key, is feeling comfortable with the fund balance.
Good summary. Let's end with that. Thank you both for being here
Thank
so
you.
much and the explanation. All right, Mr. Mendoza, let's go now to the update on property casualty insurance favors.
Thank you, Dr. Reiner. Members, Dr. Ayala. We solicited an RFP for our property casualty insurance. We received one bid from our current provider, Mr. Cavazza and Mr. Fields here. The recap of the proposal is before you. It's this particular proposal. The proposal includes what we currently have in place as far as our coverages, and then 3 options that are, they came in with the bid. So we're prepared to present this particular RFP for approval on May 9th. Just a quick recap on option number 1 has coverage of up to $50 million at a premium of $1,571,658. Option 2 has a coverage up to $100 million of our property at a premium of $1.7 million. And option 3 has a coverage limit up to $300 million at a premium of just a little bit over $2 million. Currently, we have over $500 million worth of property values and contents for our district. And Mr. Cavazza is here to review the proposals and the reason behind the layered approach. If you don't mind.
Good afternoon. I'm going to use your board, if you don't mind. So, Madam President and
board members, Dr. Munoz, thanks for indulging me for a few minutes.
You need like real chalk or old school or?
I would rather.
Let's give it a shot. Let me see if I can get this on the board to make some sense. This is 2022, which is the current year. And what we have here basically is, this is zero insurance, and you bought last year 100 million from, let's see, you bought 100 million from AmRisk. That's the name of the insurance carrier. This, and then you bought another up to here, got to 300. This is just really 200 million from AXA XL. So we're moving this way, and all the buildings are down here, and we have zero exposure. And then we start saying, well, we got a $500 million schedule, so of all the buildings here, the first 100 million is going to be covered by AmRisk, and then anything over that goes to XL. All right? Okay, this year, it looks like this. And we have zero again. And then we have 50 million with AmRisk. Then we have get to 100 million, and we're buying basically 50 from Arrowhead. And then we get to, if we want to go back to 300, we would buy 200 million. And that would be, I think it's AXA XL again. I'll check in a minute, but I'm pretty sure that's where it is. So what's happening here is this whole program cost 1.254, and that was including everything in that year. This year, the way it's working, this layer right here is 1.571, and then this layer is 158,436, and this layer is 327,366. So when you look at your sheet, you're looking at this 1.5 plus a 1.58, and that's buying $100 million in coverage for the $1.7 million on your sheet. All right. So what happened here? Well, you'll see AmRisk last year was willing to do 100 million. Years before, they would do the whole schedule. But the insurance marketplace changed a lot because reinsurers started pulling out, and these guys couldn't go buy reinsurance, so they were having to basically reduce the amount of insurance they sold, so that they wouldn't ruin their balance sheets. So from this year, from the expiring year to the new one going forward, they cut their capacity back to 50 million. We had to go buy another 50 million from Arrowhead to get to 100. And if you wanted to go back to 300, you spend 327, 366 to put 200 on top of the whole stack. So again, like I said, the marketplace is a real issue. The claims that you've seen, the disasters and that kind of thing have really made a big change in how things are working. So what I did is I had the insurance companies who come up with these premiums to model this. And so they come up with a scientific model that tells us what a storm's going to look like. And I gave the report to your staff. And it's called an RMS model. And the model I'm recommending you do is this one, at least buy 100 million, which is the 1.7 and change. So at least buy up to 100 million. And the reason I say that is because when they did their analysis of a catastrophe, their 500-year storm a 0.20% chance that it'll happen in any given year. Your exposure after deductibles, 50 million, almost $51 million. If you wanted to go to a 1,000-year storm, which is 0.10 in any given year, your exposure goes to 69 million. So these are net of deductibles. But it's covering, this 100 million here is basically covering a 500 and 1,000-year storm. And so that's why I'm pretty much pushing that. If you really wanted to be aggressive and just say, well, we're willing to take a little bit more risk, you could only buy this piece here and just buy 50 million. It's too small, it seems to me. I feel it's better to buy this one. So this basically represents, I can tell you for this year, this is, this group here is 8 insurance companies, all participating together. This is 1, and this is 1.
Thank you for that explanation. One question I have is, can you describe the role that then FEMA would play in some of these large-scale storms where we would have 100 million worth of damage?
All right.
Explain that part of it too, please.
FEMA would have a role. I'd have to go look up exactly what it is, but you would have to depend on FEMA funds. There is something in the act they have that basically says that you would have to prove that you bought as much as you could. And you have to have, backup for that. So I could get that information for the board meeting, but there would be a role. And this issue with limit is just, especially along the coastline and then even back in, all the numbers that are coming in from the school districts that are bidding are up. Wesco is $2 million. And I think their wind limit was lower. Los Fresnos was up in this area. Texas Southmost was up in this area. And you can tell some of those are bigger and smaller school districts. Now, you're further in, and the school district tends to model well. I've always been told that by the underwriters. In other words, when they do the buildings and look at the distance from the coast, it models well. So that is why sometimes your rates are a little bit better. And I guess the best example for that, if you're buying 100 million for 1.7, and Wesco only bought 50 million of wind for 1.9, and they're further inland, that means you model well. That's the best example I can think of.
Other questions, comments from the group?
What is our deductible?
It's 5%. It's been 5% for wind and hail, and then your fire deductible is $1 million.
What about flooding?
Flooding, you have 3 campuses covered. Just 3. Yeah. They're the ones in the highest risk flood zones, and we've done some work on quoting them all, but it also gets cost prohibitive. So I think that the administration said, well, we're going to pick the worst ones, the ones that we don't flood.
Which 3 are they?
Richmond, Wilson, and
Vernon, right?
And one of our largest claims have been through flooding. This one had $100,000 worth of damage to our, on that claim. But it was through flooding, not through windstorm.
Vernon surprises me. Dishman doesn't, there's a lake out there every time we get 3 or 4 inches of rain.
Yeah. Last time there was a $100,000 claim on that.
And there has been a lot of improvements on the drainage out in that area, but the problem we're still having is with all the construction that's going on within the city, you're not going to have as much runoff as you used to. So some of your areas that you thought would never flood are probably going to look at a little more likelihood of flooding. That's most of the damage that we've received in the county areas is through flooding. It's not really through the wind and hail damage. The flooding is what's really getting on us. Remember where you are right here, you're in what we call zone 3, which is, it's very unlikely only on a category 5 that we would evacuate, because you're not going to receive storm surge here. You're going to receive the storm surge up in the city of Los Fresnos is the furthest it will go. you do have a major issue with the flooding, because as that storm surge is rising, and IBW or IWBC or IBWC releases the water into the arroyo, that arroyo is going to start to rise. And once that starts to rise is where we're gonna have the issues of the flooding in some of the areas that are close to the arroyo, which is Sam Houston and all of those areas that we really need to look at, because during, I think it was 2004, when we had a lot of rain coming in, that arroyo almost crested. It was really high in a lot of areas. They haven't done the work that they said they were gonna be doing the work on the arroyo, so it's still a very risky situation around the schools that are close to the arroyo. So those might be some that you want to look at for increasing on some of the flooding issues. Those are the serious ones. As far as the deductibles go, remember FEMA will get you for the uninsured. That's what we calculate, is on uninsured damage. So if you have insurance, we're not going to be able to calculate this to get our FEMA guidelines. So we have to reach within the county $1.5 million of uninsured before we can do public assistance, which includes the schools and the cities. Individual assistance can happen a lot quicker just with the damages to the homes, but for us to get that, we have to have 1.5 million. That means you've got to look at your roadways, you've got to look at all your parking areas. Everything that's being done has to be monitored and taken photos of, so you can prove that the damage happened after this. So on the $1 million deductible, that can be utilized to help reach that. So if you do have catastrophic events and you do have to come up with $1 million to be able to cover that, or the 5% of a named storm, that cost can be captured in the numbers that we need to reach that 1.5. But even though we meet 1.5, the state of Texas has now gone up to 60 million. So on a Cat 1 or Cat 2, you're probably not going to reach that national threshold unless you have some serious flooding. But on a Cat 3 or Cat 4 that affects the whole coastal region, you're going to have, you'll probably meet that and get FEMA guidelines and FEMA assistance on that. But everything has to be documented.
Question, so, but we're talking about separate insurance. This is not flooding, we have flood insurance, right?
You're on three different
Three
campuses.
campuses though.
Yeah, we need to talk about it on what he's talked about. That's not here. This is strictly.
This is strictly property, right?
This is property, it's windstorm
Flooding,
and fire.
flooding is a separate deal.
Yeah, we're working on that.
But on this one right here with your
And that's our
$1 million,
biggest, and that's our biggest risk, right?
That is correct.
That's our biggest risk every time is flooding, right?
That is
Whether
correct.
rain sits here like Dolly, or it's the, or it's a surge effect like another hurricane that doesn't sit here, but it's our flooding is always the biggest risk, right? So
It seems to me, yeah.
that's a separate issue, I just want to be clear.
Right,
So
right.
with this insurance, I just want to be clear, is there an option, I mean, I think we need to talk to other districts. What is our last date we have to approve this?
531.
531.
Okay, so we have some time. I think we need to talk to other districts and figure out what's going on here. I mean, this is a huge increase. This is
Oh,
a
yeah?
big
I agree.
deal, you know what I mean? You say 100 million, I don't know, 50 million, I mean, I don't know, what if we go with no coverage? Is there a state statute that requires us to have coverage?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
there's nothing that says you have to have coverage.
Right.
But
we
you-
can certainly help out with your deductible right
Well,
away.
it would right away, but we still, that, remember,
I
that's
just
not a
think
guarantee.
we need to think of all options here, right? And without being irresponsible, I mean, maybe that's irresponsible, I don't know. We need to figure out all options here, including no coverage, in my opinion, because this is huge money. I mean, we can certainly afford to be self-funded for a couple of years and kind of figure things out, because that's way out there. And so I think we need to think about this a little bit more.
And you do need it, because if you have a fire that destroys one school,
No, I get it,
You know.
but I think we need to think about all options, and I'm not saying that's going to be our option, but we need to think about it. We need to think about all the options and talk to other districts and find out what's going on here before we come back with an answer to this. Because it's just like,
Sure, but what we.
it's like a take it or leave it, you're getting screwed kind of thing, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, you know, I mean,
We need to do something before the end of the month.
531, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So that'll be next year.
Yeah, so we have a couple of, we have a couple more board meetings up to the middle of May, special board meetings that we have for, we're gonna be.
Correct.
515. Yes.
Is that Dr.
So
Ello?
just to add,
Oh, okay, hi, Doc. You're like,
so we're not coming through. Just to add, we do have a board meeting next week. We have one on the 15th for the counting of votes. And then we still have to set up a budget workshop sometime before the end of this month. So we have a few opportunities there that will allow us some time to study this a little bit more. I think we also have to, in conjunction, probably have a conversation around flood insurance as a whole And what's that correct balance between casualty insurance and flood insurance, and how do we hit that sweet spot? So I think we have some time still to study and then make a decision even before the 31st.
Thank you, Dr. Nayola.
Thank you, Doc.
Any other comments, questions, anything else, sir? Thank you for that.
No, I think that you all are thinking about this very hard, and this is the way it's worked out, and it's for pretty much most of the school districts along the coastline.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I need to leave this here? Can I take it off?
It's totally fine. This is being recorded anyway. You can leave it there.
All right.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, okay, we have covered, officially, we've covered all of the items in various orders, so we are now at adjournment. Thank you all so much for the comments, questions, and attendance.